As part of the 8th Missouri Infantry Regiment Reenactors, Stan Prater has been portraying General Ulysses S. Grant for 2 decades. In this 3-part program, we gain insights in biography as Mr. Prater speaks in the persona of General Grant and answers questions as Grant just after his appointment to command all the Union armies in March 1864. And then, as himself, discusses his research and his assessment of one of America's most famous and important military leaders.
This is 1864, and it's just very hard to imagine that this war has lasted so long, starting in 1861 at the firing upon Fort Sumter. Coming over today, I was kind of amazed that now I'm a lieutenant general, which means I am the commander of every man that is fighting in this war in the U.S. Army. And I started thinking about that at the time. What responsibilities? It was a short time I was in Ohio, and as a young lad, I wasn't really interested in school that much. I tried to avoid it as much as I possibly could, but my parents would have nothing to do with that. I was always very good with horses and did quite a bit with the horses and the wagons at the time. But one day my father came up and he asked, and looking at me right in the eye, what do you think about the West Point Military Academy? I've never heard of the West Point Military Academy at the time, and I had no reason to leave Ohio. I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying it. I am fine with my horses and what I'm doing. Well, he looked me right in the eyes and says, you've been appointed, you're going to the West Point Military Academy. And I looked him right in the eyes and I said that I won't go. And in a short time, he looked at me without even batting an eye and says, you will go. And about 3 weeks later, I was heading to the West Point Military Academy in New York. And I was a fair student, but again, I wasn't interested in the Army at the time. Well, I did graduate, and my first assignment was a place called Jefferson Barracks in South St. Louis. And actually, that's where I met my wife, Julia, at a place called Whitehaven. And in a short time, we were married. Well, it wasn't long, I found out that the military was the best position for me. And I was given, when the war broke out, in charge of the 21st Illinois in Mattoon. And it wasn't long I got my first star, maybe because I went through West Point. But today what I'm talking about, when I was thinking, I am the lieutenant general. This is the highest rank of general since George Washington, and I have this responsibility now. Now, I wasn't interested in school, but right now I'm thinking maybe I should have studied a little bit more, because this war has to end. As a general, my ideas started that we had to catch every fort that was along the Mississippi River that was commanded by the Confederate guns. The Mississippi is used mainly for their transportation to get supplies to their army. And it was a short time. My army took Fort Henry, Fort Donelson, Shiloh, Tennessee, Vicksburg. My Army of the Tennessee was the only U.S. Army that was winning battles. And maybe that's the reason today that I am a lieutenant general. But I have a lot of people that's responsible, that I'm going to be responsible for. And that plays on, did I study enough? Did I get enough education? What makes the people, what makes the president, what makes the Congress trust me to make all the decisions in the future of these armies? One thing I always look forward to, even when I'm looking over that battlefield, is when I'm going to get home to St. Louis, when I'm going to see my wife and 4 children. I'm gone most of the time, And sometimes they'll let my wife Julia come into the camp and visit with me. My officers tend to think that it kind of calms me down because my mind's always racing and going. And some officers will ask, General Grant, how do you do it? How do you go on that battlefield and keep on fighting and win these battles? Well, to tell you the truth, my idea is to strike the enemy hard, strike him fast, and never let up. Keep pushing, keep pushing. He doesn't know for sure if he's beating me. I'm not for sure if I'm beating him. But I figure if I keep pushing and my men keep rallying around that flag, we'll win. We'll keep pushing back, and it has paid off. Just the other day, before I got my commission, I met our president, President Lincoln. I can remember I wound up on a train. I took one of my youngest sons, Fred. And when I got into town of Washington, there was a lot of soldiers, a lot of officers, there was bands playing, there was politicians going constantly. But I remember when I did meet the president, and he took me into a back room, and he has all these maps laid out, and he's down on his knees, he's studying his maps, and I'm not saying a word. But he is a military mind. And I'm thinking, it was a short time. I was just in St. Louis. I was in Galena, Illinois, working in a tannery shop. And here I am today with the president down on his knees, looking over the war maps, pointing what may be going to happen in 1864 in the future. But I'll never forget. Down with the president, he looked up at me. He looked me right in the eyes. He says, General Grant, we definitely need you. This war has to end. It can't continue on. But let me tell you this, General Grant. Whatever you decide to do, never tell me. Because I have a big mouth. It'll get in the newspaper, and the armies that you're getting ready to fight will know what you're going to do before you even get there. I have a lot of respect for our president. His ideas, what the future for the United States, I'm on board to bring it, to bring all the states together, to make this the United States of America again. Thank you.
General Grant, thank you so much for being here. It is a true honor to meet you, sir.
Glad to be here.
You shared the story of how you met Abraham Lincoln the first time. Why do you think President Lincoln chose you to lead the Union forces?
That's a very good question. I think mainly, as I was saying earlier, thanks to my Army of the Tennessee, that we were able to open up that Mississippi River that was so important to get it out of the Confederates' hands because of supplies of their army, to get it into the U.S. hands, that we won every battle. Until Fort Donelson, my understanding, there has never been a major United States Army victory. My Army of the Tennessee was the very first. I'm including the armies back east, the Army of the Potomac, which is a huge army. They're not winning, but our Army of the Tennessee were. I think that might have had a big play. I think the President and the Congress has seen my war record. They're putting everything on me.
I'm wondering, what's your opinion of the Confederacy's top general, General Lee? You mentioned the Mexican War. I believe you guys both served in that war, didn't you?
You're correct. General Lee, he's a few years older than me, and he finished West Point. He was in the U.S. Army at the time of the war broke out. Matter of fact, the administration at the time had asked him to command all the U.S. armies, and he refused it. He wanted to go back home to Virginia. It's his home, and protect Virginia and all. But as far as Robert E. Lee, once they made me a lieutenant general, I fight different than other officers. I don't go after cities. I don't go after towns. I go after the armies. I fight at the armies. My biggest thing is General Robert E. Lee commands the Army of Northern Virginia. I'm going after General Robert E. Lee. He's got one of the biggest armies in the Confederacy. And if I can bring him down, I think this will end shortly. Once I set up headquarters, my eyes are going to be on him. He's a very good general. I can tell from the reading and papers and all how he's played our generals back east. And he has a lot less men, a lot less supplies than I do. To hold up all these years, he has got to be a good general. And I got to keep that in mind in the weeks to come.
General Grant, thank you so much for taking the time out of the war for today just to fill us in on yourself as a person and what you've done. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I hope I get to meet you again someday, sir.
I hope so too. Thank you.
All right, that was General Ulysses S. Grant. Now we're joined by General Ulysses S. Grant, reenactor, Stan Prater. Stan Prater, welcome to Educate Today.
It's been fun. Thank you.
What got you interested in General Grant?
It goes back in time. It's probably, I might have been 4th grade to 5th grade. Got a little bit in school about the American Civil War, and as later it went, when I got in the 8th grade, I started reading more. I think reading. As far as with General Grant, as I got older and decided I wanted to do Civil War reenacting, I wound up forming a group called the 8th Missouri Civil War Volunteers. We're all reenactors, and we reenact battles, or we'll do living histories or talks and all. And then through the research of this group of the 8th Missouri from St. Louis that marched out of St. Louis here in 1861, I started seeing how it related with them, with General Grant, because they were with General Grant. So branching off, I started reading a little bit about General Grant, but maybe before even the battles and getting into details of battles and about him, I was intrigued that he was lived here in St. Louis, a place called Whitehaven, and eventually as President of the United States, he owned it. He owned Whitehaven. So it branched off from there.
Did you already know how to ride a horse? Is that something you had to learn to do a proper General Grant since he loved horses so much, or?
Well, I pretty much learned how to ride horses before even I did the impression of General Grant. As we were saying earlier, I'm a Civil War reenactor, and when in reenacting you learn you're a private at the beginning. You studied from the same handbooks as they did in the Civil War and the drills and all. And for long they were advancing me to captain, and for long to colonel. And as a colonel on a reenactment battlefield, you could possibly be in command of 150 to 300 to 400 men, and giving commands to your colonels and all. And when you're on the ground, trying to give those commands, and of course we don't have radios. Communications are a lot different back in that time. Is that some of the cavalrymen says, Stan, you need to be mounted for you can give commands. For long they were bringing me horses, throwing me on horses. I figured this would be a short life here because I had no professional training. And from day one with them making sure that I wouldn't get hurt, I just fell in love with horses. I've had horses ever since. I don't just ride horses in reenactments. I spend hours in the saddle. I just love being around horses and all. Not trying to relate that with General Grant at all, but it came about from reenacting pretty much.
How did you do your research? Like for the part of General Grant, and also did you buy your own uniforms? Did you make it yourself? How did you create this character that we got to meet today?
Well, first thing is that before you try to do definitely impression, no matter who it is, you try to learn as much as you can. So you read constantly. You read constantly, and it was a short time when I was doing all this reading that people knew that was my thing at the time, and they were bringing me books. And of course, I'm reading more and doing more research about it. The uniforms, there's people that it's all they do is make period type clothes. It could be revolutionary, it could be Civil War. You just put your order in, and they're experts on how it should be done. So you get it made that way. But it takes a lot of research, and also you got to learn the expressions and stuff, and try to give as much true facts as you can.
Where do you know something is like something you should include in the character, or what might be like something that comes to mind is like George Washington. There's a thing about the cherry tree. Growing up, I always thought that was true. Then as an adult, I was told it wasn't. Was there ever anything like that with Grant where you had to like really dig into it?
There definitely was, and the biggest research that took so much time was the rumors that General Grant was a drunkard. And through my constant research and reading articles from his staff officers and his wife and political friends and all, what it came down to, what I can say, is a lot of that was printed in the papers as a criticism because he was doing so well and accomplishing so much. It's just kind of a jealousy thing. General Grant did drink, but he knew when not to. There was never any records that he ever was drinking on the battlefield, never was. He had a low tolerance for alcohol. So it wouldn't take much that he would get a little tipsy at the time. But as far as being a down ground drunk, no. And I tell you, I've done a lot of research, and that's not so. It's mostly just jealousy articles and stuff that was written about him.
What was the most interesting thing you learned about Ulysses S. Grant throughout your research? Were there any fun facts that just jumped out at you that you would have never thought?
General Robert E. Lee was having a conference with his men, and one of the staff officers of the Confederates told General Lee, well, the U.S. Army, they have another general again. They've been going through a lot of generals, and they all start laughing and about it. One of Julia Dent's relation was there in that meeting. He was a Confederate, General Longstreet, and he knew Grant. And he looked at Robert E. Lee and says, sir, I know this man. We got problems. He is going to bite into us, and this man is not going to turn loose. We have major, major problems. Grant had one thing on his mind, and that was do his job. He didn't try to, at the time, get involved when he was in the Army to get involved with politicians or give his... matter of fact, he didn't really belong to any political party at the time. You know, he considered himself as an officer. He was given a job to do, and that's what he concentrated on.
Mr. Prater, I'm so happy to have had you in today.